Hi, welcome to today's episode of Cold Hearted Complaints. Today we're going to be talking about Game of Thrones, the massively popular high fantasy series from HBO, based on the series of books by George R.R. Martin called A Song of Ice and Fire. The series is lauded for being a TV show like no other, with incredible acting, jaw-dropping cinematography, and effects like you've never seen on the small screen. It's a series where actions have consequences that never flinches from killing off important characters when they make mistakes, giving you this constant feeling that no matter what scene you're in, your favorite character might be moments from death. At least that's the goal anyway. The show was just concluded and I have no comments on season 8 or the ending of the show outside of saying that it was an experience like no other, and I'm grateful that a show like this was made in the first place, though that isn't what I'm here to talk about today. A few years back, HBO teamed up with then lauded game developer Telltale Games to create a 6-part video game based on the series. This game would feature a northern noble family called House Forrester, and you play as various members of the house trying to save their family from absolute ruin. Telltale at the time was the talk of the industry, putting out fantastic games like The Walking Dead Season 1 and A Wolf Among Us. Games that were an evolution of the point-and-click, choose-your-own-adventure, visual novel. They're their own thing that were an evolution of a few different older types of video games. Now, gameplay was typically dialogue-heavy and choice-based, with their classic blank character will remember that text that appears after many choices, keeping you off guard but what you say and how will come back to haunt you. Now, most of the time, it never came back up, but when it does, it's oh so satisfying. My personal favorite game of theirs is A Wolf Among Us. I love this game. You play as Bigby Wolf, who is a sheriff in New York, but part of a fairy tale community, right? He's the big bad wolf, and then around you have all these different fables, all these different fairy tale creatures who secretly live in New York and have an underground community, and you're the sheriff and you have to solve a murder mystery. It's a really fun game with all these different turns and twists and different things you can find on different playthroughs, and I could make an entire video just on how much I love this game, but I'm not doing that today. And we're not here to talk about A Wolf Among Us, even though I really want to. We're here to talk about Game of Thrones. Now, on the surface, this seems like a fantastic idea. Game of Thrones is known for its hard choices, sharp dialogue, and political movings, making characters choose between duty and love, honor over survival, and whether or not you should keep sleeping with your sister, which, gotta say, you'd think everyone would know the answer to that last one, but here we are. The key with all good ideas, though, is it comes down to execution, and with this, well, let's get into that. A bit of housekeeping to start here though. There will be spoilers for Game of Thrones Season 1 through Season 4. So if you haven't watched until that point, I want you to be aware there may be content from those seasons that are going to be spoiled here. I want to also set an expectation that you have a basic understanding of the world of Game of Thrones, as it is very dense and I can't explain every single thing without making this video way too long. I also want to use this time to bring up a content warning. There is a lot of graphic violence and torture in Game of Thrones, and by extension, this video. Viewer discretion, especially if you have problems with gore, violence, or any sensitive subjects like that, is heavily advised. With all that said, the non-spoiler time has ended, which I stress so much because this series opens with one of the most shocking twists in television history: the Red Wedding. This saw the end of the rebellion of Robb Stark, the son of the Warden of the North, Ned Stark, who was executed by King Joffrey and his family, the Lannisters. After Ned was initially captured, Robb gathered his forces to march south. Then when they got news he was executed, the leaders of the North decided they would war for independence and proclaimed Robb the King in the North. Everything about Robb's story makes him sound like the ultimate hero. He's smart, he's charming, he's talented, he's a brilliant general. He's a man who marries for love, he fights for the freedom of his people, and he's noble, just, and by all rights, the all-around protagonist of protagonists if there ever was one in this story, and he's by far the most likable of the 5 kings in this war. And yes, there are 5 kings in this war. Again, I'm not getting into all the details. There's 5 kings. There's a lot. It's a big war. Don't worry about it. We're just gonna move on. Even with all of this behind him, he's still betrayed and murdered along with his mother and most of his men. Betrayed by the cruel and disgusting House Frey and the torturous, brutal, and just cold House Bolton, who after betraying him are given the lands that Robb was trying to liberate, subjecting them to their horrible, cruel rule. And it's great. You start the game here in episode 1 playing as Garrett, a squire to Lord Gregor Forrester, out to fetch wine just as the ambush begins. This shows off the effectiveness of Telltale's limited gameplay, as it is more of a visual novel with a lot of quick-time events to give the experience of combat, while also being much easier to program. Garrett dodges and weaves out of danger, doing everything he can to fight off the frays when he sees Roderick Forrester, firstborn son of Gregor, the future Lord of House Forrester, get wounded, and we assume killed as a horse falls on top of him. When Garrett makes it back, he and the Lord try to run to safety when Gregor is injured and gives Garrett his sword, telling him to tell his uncle Duncan the North Grove must never be lost. Garrett runs as his lord is killed and makes his way home. We then pick up with Garrett walking to his home and finding 3 soldiers, one of House Bolton, the new Wardens of the North, and the other 2 of House Whitehill, who hold a Montague and Capulet-style hatred towards House Forrester. Because things weren't sad enough, Garrett finds that they've killed his little sister and are watching his father bleed to death. They attack him next and he kills one, and then you get a chance to either kill or spare another as the third, a Whitehill soldier named Britt, escapes. Finally though, Garrett makes it back to Ironrath, a fortress at the north edge of the Wolf's Wood, and the home of House Forrester. There they make a living harvesting ironwood trees, get it? Because they're House Forrester, they tend the forests, it all makes sense, really. Garrett delivers the sad news of how everyone is dead and of his own family's murder. Because he killed a Bolton soldier, or a Whitehill, it's never really clear which soldier you have to kill, but you kill one of them, that's all bad. And feeling retaliation due to House Forrester's former strong alliance to House Stark, Garrett is sent by his uncle Duncan to the Wall to become a man of the Night's Watch. He also delivers his lord's last words and is sent away. Cut to the new Lord of House Forrester, this young boy named Ethan. He is given the responsibility to lead his house and to choose a sentinel, which is basically like your right-hand man. You're given the choices of the peaceful and diplomatic Duncan and the battle-hardened man of action Sir Royland, who believes all struggles can be solved with strength. In this playthrough, I chose Duncan, wanting to see if I could politic my way through this. Then, if you go to King's Landing, there is the eldest daughter of the family, Mira Forrester, who tries to help her house from the capital, as she is the handmaiden to Marjorie Tyrell, who was arranged to marry the king. Mira, being a northern girl whose family fought in the rebellion, is not trusted, especially by the king's mother, Cersei Lannister. So every step she takes has to be careful, as it could be her last. These are your 3 main playable characters, and each have interesting and difficult paths to walk. Now let's just end chapter 1 here, right? So we got Ramsay Snow, bastard son to Lord Bolton, and a man who really loves to torture a tad too much. He comes to Ironrath to see the Forresters pledge themselves to the Boltons and apologize for the murder of the Bolton man. Do everything that Ramsay wishes, like I did, or completely defy him. Either way, he'll notice Ethan's twin sister, Talia, and try to take him with her. Ethan will stand up to Ramsay, so naturally he stabs him in the throat and sends the youngest son of House Forrester, Ryan, the future lord, because he's the only one left, to be hostage to the Whitehills to keep the Forresters in line, as he gives the Whitehills half of the Forresters' ironwood trees, and all while this is happening, Ethan is bleeding to death on the floor in his mother's arms. As a quick note, they would release these games as chapters or episodes. There's one episode that would come out, then you had to wait a few weeks, months, and then the next episode would come out. In that time, it would give you, some moments to think about your choices and how your choices are going to reflect in the next series. But it would give you time to get emotionally invested in this story. Now, it's very clear at the end of this, they were going for what happened at the end of season 1 of Game of Thrones when they killed off Ned Stark. And it's a very effective hook, they killed off their main protagonist, the head of House Forrester, the family you're trying to protect. They murdered him in the first episode, and he's a child. How could you, as a person who's interested in Game of Thrones, who's interested in the Telltale storytelling, how could you see something like this and not say, if they're willing to murder kids in their first episode, what else do they have in store for us? Right, so, it's a bit of a rough start for the Forresters, but luckily, look who drops on by.
7-0.
Well, yes, it's the firstborn son, Roderick, who barely survived the battle, then was thrown into a corpse cart and taken home. Thankfully, though, he is alive, though greatly injured, hobbled by the sword that went through his thigh and also with a whole bunch of face markups. He's wounded. He's pretty badly wounded. But once he's well enough, he takes command and starts to put together plans to take back Ryan and deal with the garrison of White Hill soldiers that have now been stationed inside their walls. Across the sea to the east, though, the exiled second son of House Forrester, Asher, is working as a sellsword with his best friend Beshka. They run to the Lost Legion, who's a bunch of jerks who try to kill them. Asher and Beshka overcome them, and together they conveniently run into Asher's uncle Malcolm, who was sent to take him back home with an army of sellswords to protect Ironrath from the White Hills. We'll get back to all that later. Garrett is at the wall. It's very cold. And he meets new friends, a thief named Cotter and a big meathead named Finn. This is mainly just practice. There's not a whole lot of story going on here. Also, hey look, Jon Snow. That's pretty neat. Flash over to King's Landing, and Mira is playing the game and working with Tyrion Lannister, the Master of Coin, on who will receive the Royal Ironwood contract, a lucrative deal. It's against her and the men sent by Lud Whitehill, the leader of House Whitehill, a hot-headed man named Lord Andros, and an even-tempered man named Lord Morgren. Then Mira gets a letter from a secret admirer to meet them in the garden at midnight. Oh look, it's a friendly Lannister guard. He's just trying to give us a friendly stabbing to death. Luckily, a coal boy saves us, thank you very much, coal boy, and Mira stabs him nice and hard. Well, you have a choice of stabbing or running. Always choose stabbing. Back at Ironrath, Roderick is meeting his betrothed, who, actually, for a twist, loves him. Aw, that's so sweet. But she needs to know if this will be a successful military alliance. Being the charmer that I am, I convince her that everything is going just swell and maintain our alliance and future marriage. I really like this segment, and in a few playthroughs I failed it. And you can really feel the stakes and emotion involved in this scene. This is a man trying to convince the woman that he loves to stay with him so that his family doesn't fall into ruin. The stakes couldn't be any more personal than that. Then, Lud Whitehill immediately marches in to tell him to kiss his ring so that Ryan can go to the funeral of their father and Ethan. Wanting to show strength, I refuse. Which, I mean, really, this decision doesn't matter at all, so to heck with Lud, not kissing that ring. There is a funeral. Everyone is sad. We meet Gwen Whitehill, who had a Romeo and Juliet style romance with Asher, which is why he was banished. She tells us, and tries to be really sympathetic about it, that we should just give up if we want to survive, which, I mean, no. Thank you, Gwen, though. Asher, Beshka, and Malcolm are off on a wild ride through a dry valley, being chased by some more Lost Legion people out for revenge because of the other Lost Legion people you murdered. This is otherwise known as the Good Times. They get chased to a cave, find Drogon the dragon, a friendly beast that nearly burns Beshka alive then bolts out of there. This dragon belongs to the Dragon Queen Daenerys Targaryen, aptly named because she has 3 dragons, who also happens to have all the sellswords. So you have to go to her to try to convince her, just give us a few, just a few hundred. We just need like a few hundred to save our family. Is that gonna be okay? We'll get back to how the negotiations go later. Garrett becomes a man of the Night's Watch, sworn to take no wives, father no children, and to guard an ice wall until you die. You also talk with Jon Snow a bit. Doesn't really say a lot of anything useful, but now everyone thinks you're friends with Jon for some reason, which, sure, I guess. Then, comically, the Whitehill who killed your family, Britt, turns back up as he's been sent to the wall for his crimes. So guess how that ends? Did anyone really think these two wouldn't try to kill each other? They mentioned like, oh, you're brothers of the Night's Watch, you can't kill each other anymore. Like, are you joking? Are you joking? Okay, whatever. Back at Ironrath, Roderick is dealing with the youngest son of Lud Whitehill, a loud idiot who, like his father, thinks that yelling you're in charge means you're in charge. Most of this episode is Roderick and friends talking about how much their lives suck and trying to decide how to take care of the Whitehills by either focusing on taking back Ryan or kicking out Griff. Also, in a secret meeting, Gwen lets Roderick know that he has a traitor feeding info to the Whitehills. Meanwhile, Mira is wheeling and dealing, working with Tyrion Lannister to secure a lumber contract with the Crown. When Marjorie Tyrell finds out, the person you're the handmaiden to, she is furious, telling Mira that this will make her enemies at court, which... why? Sure, people don't like her because she's northern and they think her family's traitors, right? Sure, people also don't like Tyrion, but he's the master of coin. This is his job. Like, who else is gonna make a lumber deal with you? How does a lumber deal with a house that's known for its lumber really affect Mira in any way, or Marjorie, or anyone? Like, it's just, like, that's just a lumber, who the fuck cares about a lumber contract? But they make it a whole big deal, you know, whatever. Well, it also turns out that a little after this, it then does become a big deal because Tyrion is accused of poisoning the king. So Mira has to steal the Ironwood decree from Tyrion's room so that no one knows they were working together. I don't love the direction this story takes, but we'll get to that later. Okay, so far I've given you short plot descriptions. I haven't really gotten into the details of how your choices affect things and how your story changes based off your decisions. There is a reason for that, and in no chapter is that better illustrated than this one. Remember back in chapter 2 when Roderick had to convince the Glenmores that he is still the best choice for Elena Glenmore to marry? And for me, it was a great moment of seeing, how I can politic my way through this, how I can convince and use my charisma and ability, to understand politics of the area to keep allies. Well, no matter what you do, whether you'd been a master negotiator like I was, or whether you completely flopped, the outcome is exactly the same. Elena and her brother Arthur Glenmore come to visit Roderick and Ironrath to give him their support because the White Hills are making threats and want to marry Griff to Elena. But since no one likes the White Hills, they decide to fight back. Which, hey, that's cool, but I wish my skill kind of mattered in any sort of way here. Remember this point? We're gonna come back to that later. Anyway, Roderick uses them to capture Griff and imprison the White Hill soldiers, and you're given a chance to rough up Griff a bit if you really don't like him that much, and I really didn't like him that much, while also telling your inner circle of family that you have a traitor in your midst. You're then given an invitation to visit the White Hills, who don't know of Griff's capture, to bargain on the future of your house. In the meeting, you argue, and can actually end the game.
Now, Royland!
This is a very Game of Thrones ending. I like this ending a lot, actually. But more likely, you'll bargain Ryan for Griff, lastborn son for lastborn son, looking like you can finally get on equal footing with the White Hills. Everything is looking up. Asher has finally made it to Meereen, where all the sellswords are, and are in the middle of discussions with Daenerys about how it would be really swell if they could have a few sellswords, a couple hundred here, be really great. She instead gives you a task on helping her capture the city of Meereen, and then she will let you have some sellswords. So Asher and Beshka accept the quest, Beshka being really reluctant to accept the quest as she was a slave child forced to kill in the fighting pits here. But you go, and Beshka finds is about to kill her former slave master, even though it's explicitly against Daenerys' orders to kill any slave masters. And if she blows this, you might not get any soldiers. Though in my playthrough, I let her kill him because, how could you not? Like, fuck this guy. We go, we finish our mission, and the city falls. Up at the wall, Garrett is tossed into prison for killing Britt, even if it was in self-defense, and Finn, a witness, backs up your side of the story. Which, okay, I guess it is cool that no matter what I do, I'm considered a murderer, even though I have all the choices and evidence on my side to back me up, but whatever, it's fine. Cotter busts him out though, and you all decide that you're gonna go north of the wall, and you have an option of taking Finn with you. In this playthrough, I do, and we somehow get north of the wall and up to find the North Grove. Beyond the wall, Garrett, Finn, and Cotter meet up with some wildlings, and they stab Cotter. You kill them all, and then run into Cotter's sister, Sylvie, who Cotter says can help Garrett find the North Grove. Mira is still chilling in King's Landing, going to the new king, King Tommen's coronation feast. Well, more so you blackmail your fellow handmaiden into getting you in because Marjorie is upset at you and uninvited you from the party. But you need to be there to find out what the White Hills are planning. Using your ability to eavesdrop and gossip, you're able to find that Lord Andros, the loud asshole from chapter 2, has been trying to buy sellswords for Ludd. So Mira finds his business partner and turns them against each other, which I would say is rather impressive, and might be my favorite moment in the entire game. I want to point out these transition pieces showing the various destinations in the story. These are just gorgeous pieces and are a great example of the talent that goes behind these games. The level of detail here for something they only show every now and again is incredible. The visual style of this game is really smart and well thought out, with everything having this texture that makes it feel like an oil painting to me. It's similar to Telltale's normal style, but with a new flair to give this game its own feel. Alright, we're near the end game here, people. Now, Asher goes to Daenerys. And whether you completely obey her and stop your best friend from murdering the slave master who tortured her as a child, or you let your best friend murder a slave master because fuck that guy, she will back out of her promise no matter what you do. And if you make a good case for herself, she'll give you a chest of gold, which is very Useless. Now you may be asking yourself why I'm saying that this chest of gold is useless, and the simple reason is if you don't have the chest of gold, the story won't change. In my playthrough, I used the money to recruit some former slaves that Beshka knew in her time in the fighting pits. Now if you don't have the money, you'll just make a promise of future money to come. Then either way, Asher will be the dude to get respect and they'll join you. There is a distinction I want to make clear here about these choices. Your choices will change things, your choices have an effect, but your choices do not matter. Whether I succeeded, whether I failed, it ends the same way. Roderick comes home from his meeting to find Ramsay Snow sitting in his hall, being creepy with Talia. Ramsay takes him out to show him Arthur Glenmore, who he has been torturing brutally. He kills Arthur and decides that he really doesn't want to take sides in this feud anymore, because he really just doesn't care. So he decides to let the last house standing win. Then he sends the Glenmores home, because I guess he's not allowing us an army anymore, so that's super fair, but whatever. Later you find out that Griff and the White Hill hostages have been freed by the traitor in your house, who turns out to be Sir Royland. Though if you had chosen Royland as your sentinel, Duncan would have done the exact same things, which is weird considering that the two people are polar opposite, but they have the exact same plans and exact same ways of reacting to not getting power. This doesn't really sit right with me, but it's not really important because they say you have a secret if you choose not to execute them for their crimes. I choose to spare them, and they tell Roderick that the White Hills have laid an ambush for Asher. Garrett is still beyond the wall and trying to help Cotter recover when they get ambushed by Whites. They're a kind of ice zombie thing that kill Finn. You know, the story is practically the same with or without bringing Finn, so if you like him, leave him at Castle Black so he doesn't die cold and alone in the north. The gang escapes the Whites and runs off to find the North Grove. King's Landing is getting spicier and spicier. Now, with your relationship with Marjorie completely crumbling apart, Queen Cersei calls you in for an offer. Turn on Tyrion for her and you'll make a powerful ally. Your goal? To find who he's going to call as a witness at his trial. The only way to beat Tyrion though is to be honest with him, and he'll admit that he has no one he can call. Asher has finally made it back to Westeros, where Roderick is waiting for him, knowing that there will be an ambush, but failing to do anything about it because, surprise, ambush! What? How did this happen? This is so crazy! In another great showing of what you do not mattering, whether you get warned about this or not, nothing changes. At all. You don't make any plans or think of a way to stop the ambush, you just get ambushed. It just happens. So the gate gets taken out with most of your people on the other side already escaping. And to raise the gate, either Asher or Roderick has to hold it open so that the other can escape. This is a whammy of a choice and generally surprising for me because you have to choose between Asher and Roderick, two of the most charismatic and characters who have the most direct effect on the plot of saving your house. Now the first time I did this, I chose Roderick to live, but this time I chose Asher, just because I wanted to see how different the playthroughs are going to look like. The White Hills will fight the one you leave in the exact same way, stabbing them to death as the other rides off to safety. Alright, so this is the final chapter. This one's going to wrap it all up here. We're going to see the conclusions to all of these storylines. There isn't going to be a second game. There's nothing else past this. This is the end point for all of these stories. So, let's start it off with the most plot-heavy one, with Garrett up beyond the wall. Him and the crew finally finds a vague area that must be the North Grove and runs into a polar bear, who they run from until they find the actual entrance of the North Grove. There they find Josera and Elsera, the bastard son and daughter of late Lord Forrester. Josera is a warg, which means he was controlling that bear, and Elsera uses blood magic to enslave the corpses of these wildlings to defend the grove against the army of the undead. Cotter is dying from his stab wound back in episode 4, and Elsera wants to use him as a soldier to protect the North Grove, while Sylvie wants to give her brother a peaceful death. With all that Cotter has done for us in this entire story, you're a real asshole if you don't give him that peace. Let him die peacefully, just be done with it. Then you can decide to lead the forces of the North Grove south to help House Forrester, or remain in the North Grove and chill. I choose to go south, and that's it. That's how Garrett's story ends. Mira, meanwhile, has been trying to get away from the guards who suspect her of killing the guard that we super mega totally killed. She gets help from Lord Morgrant, who, in a twist shocking to anyone who's never seen Game of Thrones, was the one who tried to have Mira assassinated. He turns her in and then makes her an offer. Marry him so that he can eventually make claim to Ironrath or die. Since the dead can't stab a bitch in the back, I choose to have Mira get married while the coal boy takes the fall and gets executed for you. This concludes Mira's story. Okay. We got one storyline left. Here we go. Back at Ironrath, Asher declares himself Lord of Ironrath. But then people say that by Ramsay's rule, they've lost the war, which is weird, because all Ramsay said was that the last house standing wins. He didn't say if Ludd or Roderick die, the remainder wins. It's the entire house, right? But it doesn't really fucking matter because everyone just ignores that detail anyway. Ludd arrives with his army, and they offer Asher peace if he marries Gwen. This would make the Foresters subservient to the White Hills and isn't a real option. The real choice you have is that you are going to set a trap. You're either going to spring an ambush, attacking them with swords, or you're gonna poison Ludd. I choose the ambush, and while Ludd does escape and Gwen stabs Asher in the back, we do kill Griff, which is very satisfying. Then the White Hills break in and we get a long scene of the sacking of Ironrath and death. You get to kill the big guy here, which is very satisfying since he's the one who put this final knife into Roderick. Then Asher gets horribly injured and gets set off by Duncan with a rider who is dying. Asher then falls off the horse on a road outside of Ironrath, where you see him being rescued by a varying character. If you let the traitor live like I did, it'll be the traitor and Talia, while Beshka rides off, saving your little brother Ryan. This scenario has a lot of small changes based on how you play it out. If you poison Ludd, Griff will lead the sacking of the city. If you choose Roderick, you'll sneak attack Ludd at night. In a similar matter, getting a choice to either kill Ludd or Griff, then rescuing Ryan and getting the exact same ending. Ironrath will be destroyed. There is no escaping that. Which reflects again a base problem in the structure of this game. Your choices don't matter. Now I'm fine with the ending being a no-win scenario, a Kobayashi Maru, but the path there was fraught and filled with false decisions. Succeed in political move-rings and it'll be undone. Fail and the game will course correct the story for you. What am I playing one of these games for if it's not actions and consequences? That's what I want. That's what I desire out of this choose your own adventure experience, especially a Game of Thrones choose your own adventure experience. Two of the best scenes in the entirety of Game of Thrones, in my personal opinion, is Ned Stark's execution and the Red Wedding. These moments don't just shock you because, holy fuck, the main protagonist just got killed, but because you understand why they are there and the actions that cost them and the people around them their lives. Their choices mattered. That's what makes Game of Thrones tragic but rewarding, and you get none of that here. It's also a complete cliffhanger, one that because of Telltale's management, which was a lot of real scummy, is never going to get resolved. The company had to shut its doors a few years ago, and because of that, you're never going to get a real resolution to this story. So with all that said, let's review the final fate of all of our heroes. Garrett, wanted criminal for murdering a brother of the Night's Watch and deserting the Night's Watch himself. He is going south to defend a house that has been completely destroyed and will likely be captured and executed for his crimes. Ethan, stabbed through the neck by a bastard and died in his mother's arms. Mira, doomed to marry a horrible man who will likely abuse her and lock her in a tower. Asher came home from exile only to be forced to leave his brother to die, his former love to stab him after he killed her little brother, and watching his mother killed before his eyes as his family home is raided and burned by his greatest enemies. Lastly, Roderick, who survived a horrifying battle, crippled and scarred, who struggled and fought to save his house, dies, trapped in an ambush he was warned about ahead of time, so great. The ending is that everyone is miserable and happiness is for squares. Now you can slightly change the fates here. You can let Mira die, you can choose Roderick over Asher. There are things you can affect, right? Your choices can make a difference, but your choices don't matter. Which is an interesting message about how fate is unescapable and no matter what you do, you're doomed to fail, but it's not really a great message for a choose-your-own-adventure game, and it's really a downer. This game is a downer. Like, the entirety, like, everything about this story, it's just sad. No one gets a happy ending. It's all bad. A point that becomes clearer and clearer to me while making this video is a large reason why I didn't enjoy this game compared to others does come down to the fact that there are so many playable characters. When I played The Walking Dead, I was Lee. I made all of my choices in two ways, one as me, the player, and the other as Lee, the character, doing what I thought he would do and how I wanted the story to go. In The Wolf Among Us, I was Bigby Wolf. I was the one dealing with people's anger and grief, their fears and insecurities. It's Bigby's and my own journey of working in a community that hates him and choosing how you respond to that. But in this game, I'm 4 to 5 different people, each with their own personalities and missions, and it never felt like a single character story. It was all of them, which is ambitious and does reflect the show it's based on. It's a direction that I understand. Yet it also makes the overall game weaker because you don't have the time to really dig into who each character really is. Even if you did, the story is split up between them all that I just don't see how you could tie it all in to be one big cohesive story. One thing I really want to stress here is that I do not hate this game, and it has its moments where its storytelling really shines. It can be incredibly effective at making you feel like you're in a Game of Thrones story, which is one of the biggest things you can ask for from this game, but its flaws are too glaring for me to ignore. What I want to pull back on here is that the Game of Thrones Telltale game it's not awful, but it's not perfect, and there's a lot of bad decisions and flaws in the game that really hold it back from its potential. You can really feel how rushed this and a lot of other late Telltale games actually were. There are small graphical errors, there are glitches, there are janky moments. In this one scene, there's a guard that just kind of pops up out of nowhere. The model just stands in between this conversation. This happens multiple times. I've tried this scene multiple times. This always happens to me. Sometimes I'd even get a thing where like the mouth movements would just completely stop, where the person would be speaking but their mouth wouldn't be moving at all. This game to me is a culmination of why Telltale inevitably failed. There are way too many characters. You never feel like you're actually controlling a certain character. You have a game that feels and plays as rushed and unfinished. There becomes more and more a focus on quick time events and action scenes and less on the actual story you're trying to play. And then there's big crazy choice moments, this huge choice you have to make, but inevitably it doesn't matter. The choice feels entirely hollow. I really feel for the teams behind this, the animators, the programmers, the people working in the trenches in this game. I feel for them. This is not the best situation they could have been in, and they did the best they could. I'm sure they put in a ton of grueling hours and crunch time to get these games finished for us, the consumer. But I'm just sorry that it wasn't enough, or that they weren't given enough time to actually complete the story in a satisfying way. But unfortunately, that's the way it goes. Thank you for watching this episode of Cold Hearted Complaints. I really appreciate you sticking through here. We'll watch until the end. I know this is going to be a bit long. There's a lot to talk about with this. But thank you for sticking through it. If you like this video, give it a like. If you want to help me grow, which I would really appreciate, share this video around, or leave a comment letting me know about what you thought about this video, or what you thought about Telltale in general, whether you like this game or other games they did, or whether you have constructive criticism to give about that, or constructive criticism to give about the video. I'm up for it. I can handle it. Don't worry about it. But thank you very much for watching. You can always hit subscribe if you want to see more of this or other videos that I do. But other than that, thank you very much. You have a great day and stay rad.